Would you have imagined that sleep was as much a part of military discipline for Roman legionaries as battle? We tend to think of legionaries as invincible warriors in shining armor, but their main battles were often fought not against the enemy, but against fatigue, cold, and damp ground. Every night, hundreds of thousands of people had to recover their strength in conditions that we would consider unbearable today. Their sleep was not just rest, but a complex ritual refined down to the smallest detail. The secret of Roman endurance lay not only in their training or weaponry, but also in how they slept. They did not simply collapse on the ground from exhaustion. They built a fortress, made beds for themselves from whatever materials were available, and divided the night into equal periods of guard duty and rest. It was a system that worked like clockwork in every corner of the empire. Watch the video to the end to find out how a simple soldier's cloak became a legionnaire's home and blanket, and why Roman sleep was completely different from ours. What if I told you that everything you knew about Roman rest was not entirely true? For a legionnaire, there was no smooth transition from wakefulness to sleep. His entire day was subject to the monotonous rhythm of marching, hours of movement under the weight of full equipment. Fatigue built up in every muscle, but a soldier could not simply stop when he felt like it. Everything was decided by the bugle call, the centurion's command, and the choice of a place to spend the night. When the senior officers moving at the forefront determined a suitable place for camp, the long-awaited command spread throughout the legion. It was not a call to relax, but a signal to begin the most important phase of the day. A soldier who had just been an infantryman immediately became an engineer, builder, and digger. His brain had to switch from monotonous walking to performing dozens of complex and precise tasks. The first thing each soldier did was to free himself from his heavy burden, his sarsana, or backpack. This moment brought enormous relief, but it was only a short respite. The equipment was neatly folded in a strictly designated place, next to the weapons, which always had to be at hand. Losing or mixing up one's equipment in the commotion was unacceptable and severely punished. The psychological state of the legionnaire at this moment was crucial. He could not allow himself to succumb to fatigue and apathy. Discipline required him to immediately join in the collective work. How quickly and smoothly his contubernium, a group of 8 people, worked together determined whether they would have a roof over their heads before nightfall. This abrupt change of activity was a brilliant psychological ploy. It did not give the soldiers time to slack off or feel the full extent of their fatigue. The physical labor of setting up camp was different from the monotonous march. It engaged different muscle groups and required concentration. A mind occupied with work was not prone to despondency. It was at this moment that the essence of the Roman army was revealed. It was not just a crowd of warriors, but a well-coordinated mechanism. Every legionnaire knew his maneuvers by heart. He did not need to wait for separate orders for each action. The routine, hammered in over years of training, kicked in automatically. The transition from marching to rest was critically important. It demonstrated the unit's training and coordination. Any delay, any sluggishness could result in the camp not being ready on time, and that meant the soldiers would face the night defenseless, hungry, and with nowhere to sleep. That first hour after stopping was perhaps the most difficult of the whole day. The soldiers had to overcome the natural desire to just sit down and do nothing. They were cogs in a huge machine, and the machine required them to keep turning without stopping. Only after the work was done could a legionnaire think about food and sleep. The Roman army made no allowances for weather or terrain. Whether it was scorching sun or cold rain, swampy terrain or rocky plateau, the ritual remained the same. This consistency gave the soldier a sense of stability and predictability in the chaos of military campaigning. He knew what to expect and knew what was required of him. Thus, for a Roman soldier, rest did not begin when they stopped. It began only when the last tent peg was driven in and the last meter of the trench was dug. We would love to hear your opinion. What do you think about such iron discipline that does not allow you to relax for a second? Write about it in the comments. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss other stories about life in ancient times. Are you ready to learn the truth about what the Romans built every evening? Sleeping under the open sky, even under the stars of Italy, was considered an unacceptable luxury for the Roman legion. And in enemy territory, it was sheer madness. Safety was more important than fatigue. And before a single soldier could lie down on the ground, the entire legion would erect a fortified camp, a castrum. It was not just a place to sleep, but a real military city, created by the hands of thousands of people in a matter of hours. Every castrum had the same layout, regardless of whether it stood on the banks of the Rhine, at the walls of Carthage, or in a British marshy valley. A clear rectangle divided by two intersecting streets, the Via Praetoria and the Via Principalis, was the heart of the camp. This standard allowed any legionnaire to instantly find his bearings. No matter where in the empire he found himself, he knew exactly where his tent was, where the headquarters were, and where the gates were. As soon as the commander gave the order to stop, work began, carried out to perfection. Special aggripators, military surveyors, were the first to come forward and mark out the future camp. They drove in stakes, stretched out cords, marking out streets, gates, and the place for the command. They were followed by thousands of soldiers with shovels, pickaxes, and baskets. Each legionnaire carried not only a sword and shield, but also tools, a symbol that Roman discipline was based not only on blood, but also on labor. The work proceeded smoothly, like a well-oiled machine. Some dug a moat around the future camp. Its depth and width depended on the danger and how long the camp was planned to remain. But even for a single night, a moat was mandatory. The earth from the ditch was not thrown away. It was piled up inside, creating a rampart, agar, the foundation of the future wall. A palisade was erected on top of the rampart, and this is where the cunning of Roman logistics came into play. Each soldier carried 2 or 3 sharpened stakes, sudes. They were joined together and dug into the ground, forming a continuous barbed barrier. In just a couple of hours, a fortress with a palisade, a moat, and 4 gates, clearly oriented to the cardinal points, grew up around the legion. Inside the camp, work was no less intense. Soldiers pitched tents, papiliones, in neat rows like city streets. The location of each unit was strictly defined. Closer to the center were the tents of the centurions, standards, and legate, next to which was the headquarters, Principia, where documents, trophies, and sacred eagles were kept. Kitchens, warehouses, smithies, workshops, everything had its place. Even the altar for sacrifices to the gods was built immediately. This organization had not only an engineering but also a psychological meaning. Every soldier knew that his camp was a fortress, protected and reliable. Even if the enemy attacked at night, there would be no panic. Legionnaires knew their way to the gates, their section of the wall, and their commander. The camp was a battle formation built of wood, earth, and discipline. The speed of construction was astonishing. Archaeologists and ancient sources report that an entire legion, about 5,000 to 6,000 people, could build a fortified camp in 3 to 4 hours. Each soldier performed a strictly defined task: digging, carrying, hammering stakes, setting up tents. Tired after the march, the soldiers found the strength to work with the precision of craftsmen. It was a daily ritual that formed the unwavering unity of the army. When the earthworks were completed and the palisade was in place, the centurions would walk around the camp, checking that everything was in order. Only then were the soldiers allowed to prepare food and rest. The soldiers lit small fires, set up cauldrons, cooked porridge, and baked bread on hot stones. The wind stirred their woolen sagums, on which they soon lay down to sleep. To the sounds of night watches and crackling coals, the camp fell silent. Thousands of people, surrounded by a rampart and a moat, slept peacefully, knowing that around them was a fortress built with their own hands. Even in their sleep, they remained part of a machine whose strength lay not only in swords, but also in the ability to build, organize, and defend. Such a camp was not just a fence, it was a miniature Rome, the embodiment of order amid the chaos of the barbarian world. It exuded the breath of a civilization confident in its superiority. Every evening, the legion built not only a fortress, but also a symbol of the empire, a miniature city born of discipline and labor. But what if I told you that this camp was much more than just a temporary shelter? In the next chapter, we will take a look inside, into the tents where the legionnaires slept. Learn how they organized their daily lives and why, even in the cold and fatigue, the Romans maintained order and dignity. What I am about to show you is banned in 12 countries. Just kidding, of course, but the secret of the Roman tent is truly unique. Once the camp was fortified, the focus shifted to setting up personal space. For a legionnaire, this space was his tent, the papilio. It was the only place where he could shelter from the weather and take a break from the harsh discipline. The name papilio meant butterfly. Most likely this was due to the appearance of the leather tent panels when they were dried, or how they were folded. This tent did not belong to one person. It was the collective property of the contubernium, a unit of 8 soldiers who lived, ate, and fought together. The tent was made not of fabric, but of leather, most often calf or goat. The leather panels were sewn together to form a durable and waterproof covering. Although there are no precise indications in the sources, it is likely that the leather was treated with fat or oil to make it more elastic and enhance its water-repellent properties. This material had both advantages and disadvantages. A leather tent was incredibly durable and could withstand strong winds and rain. It lasted much longer than any fabric of the time. However, it was very heavy. A complete tent set weighed a lot, and its parts were distributed among all 8 soldiers of the contubernium. Setting up the tent was a ritual that had been practiced to the point of automaticity. The contubernium had a central pole, which could be disassembled into 2 parts for ease of transport, and several wooden pegs. The soldiers worked quickly and smoothly, as a single team. They spread out the leather sheet, assembled and installed the pole, then stretched the edges and secured them with pegs. The interior of the tent was not very spacious. Its dimensions were standardized to fit exactly into the grid of the camp streets. 8 adult men in full gear had to somehow fit into a small area. This required not only discipline, but also good relations within the group. The space was strictly organized. Each soldier had his own corner where he kept his equipment. A cercina, or backpack, often served as a pillow. Weapons, a gladius and a helmet, lay nearby, always ready for battle. A shield or scutum could be used as a small table or stand, and at night it was placed at the entrance. The floor of the tent was earthen. Soldiers did not sleep on the bare ground, but we will talk about that separately. The important thing is that the tent provided the main thing: protection from the elements. In a dry and relatively warm tent, a legionnaire could take off his armor, relax his tired muscles, and truly rest. The leather tent also retained heat quite well. The breath of 8 people and the warmth of their bodies quickly heated the small interior space. On cold nights, this was crucial for survival. The smell inside was probably distinctive, a mixture of leather, sweat, weapon oil, and smoke from the fires. But it was the smell of home. This leather house was a symbol of soldierly brotherhood. The 8 men who shared one tent became a real family. They endured the hardships of service together, ate together, and slept together. Not only their comfort, but also their lives depended on their coordination and mutual assistance. If you like this story about military life, please like this video. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos about how people survived in the harsh conditions of ancient times. Guess what happened next? After the tent was set up, the soldiers faced a new challenge. The leather walls protected them from the wind and rain, but under their feet was still cold, hard, and often damp ground. Sleeping on such a surface was not only uncomfortable, it was dangerous to their health. Therefore, preparing the bed was no less important a ritual than setting up the tent. First, the soldiers had to level the surface inside the tent as much as possible. They removed sharp stones, roots, and any debris that could interfere with sleep or damage equipment. In some cases, they could even make small depressions or, conversely, mounds to adapt to the terrain. It was a simple but necessary task. Of course, there was no question of beds or camp beds in camping conditions. The legionnaires had to find all their bedding on site. The main task was to create an insulating layer between the body and the cold ground. This layer had to retain heat and absorb moisture. Straw was the ideal material for such a layer. If the legion stopped for the night in a rural area, the soldiers immediately went in search of straw. They stuffed their tents with it, creating a thick, springy, and relatively soft mattress. Straw provided excellent insulation from the cold and made sleep much more comfortable. However, straw was not always available. In wild areas, in forests or mountains, they had to improvise. Soldiers collected dry leaves, ferns, pine branches, or dry grass. Anything that could create an air cushion was put to use. This work was also done collectively by the entire contubernum. The collected materials were not simply piled up in a heap. They were laid in a thick layer across the entire floor of the tent, creating a single bedding for all 8 soldiers. This was both practical and hygienic. In the morning, before breaking camp, this bedding was simply raked out and left behind, taking only the tent with them. In some cases, if time and conditions allowed, the soldiers could build more substantial sleeping places. For example, they could make small wooden platforms out of branches to raise the sleeping place above the damp ground. But this was more of a luxury available during long stops than in a normal marching camp. In addition to the common bedding, each soldier had his own personal equipment. His sarcina, a hiking backpack in which he carried his personal belongings and rations, was often used as a pillow. It was not very comfortable, but it allowed him to keep his valuables close by and raised his head. Preparing a place to sleep was an important part of a soldier's routine. Experienced legionnaires knew that their well-being in the morning depended on the quality of this preparation. Therefore, they did not hesitate to spend an extra half hour gathering ferns or straw. It was an investment in their own rest. We can see that even such a simple aspect as preparing for sleep was well thought out and organized by the Romans. They did not rely on luck, but created comfort for themselves from materials at hand. This ability to adapt was one of the strengths of the Roman army. What do you think about such resourcefulness? The tent was set up and the bed of leaves was ready, but that was not enough to protect against the night cold. In the next chapter, you will learn what one piece of equipment served as clothing, a blanket, and a roof over the head for a legionnaire. Once the main work of setting up camp and pitching tents was done, it was time for personal needs. 2 things were vital for a legionnaire at the end of the day: cooking and preparing for the cold night. For this, he had 2 key items: a small fire or faculus and his trusty cloak, the sagum. These 2 items provided the soldier with warmth, both internal and external. They were symbols of peace after a long march and a reminder that even in harsh conditions, Rome knew how to create order. Legionnaires followed a strict routine, and even their rest was part of military discipline. After the centurion's command, when the last tent pegs were driven in, the soldiers began to set up their corner. Each of the 8 men living in one contubernum knew that it was their duty not only to rest, but also to ensure the comfort of their comrades. First, they checked the place for the fire to prevent the tents from catching fire and cleared the ground of dry grass. Each contubernum had the right to build a small fire for cooking and heating. It was not a large communal fire, but a small, almost personal fire for 8 people. The place for the fire was strictly regulated, usually located on the street in front of the tent entrance. Lighting a fire inside a leather tent would be too dangerous. Therefore, there was always a pot, water, and a layer of earth nearby to quickly smother the flames if the wind picked up. The evening smoke above the camp stretched in even rows, as if Rome itself had erected its network of roads of fire under the sky. Each flame was the same size and arranged strictly in a line, because order was the essence of Roman power. Even rest became an expression of strength and discipline. Soldiers accustomed to obedience felt the invisible supervision of their senior officers even during their rest. Soldiers took turns gathering firewood and maintaining the fire. Some went to the nearest forest, others sorted through old branches or roots left over from the day's work. The fire not only provided warmth, but also the opportunity to cook hot food. The basis of a legionnaire's diet was grain, which he carried with him. He had to grind it himself on a small hand mill and bake unleavened cakes or cook soup. This took a lot of time and effort, but the Romans were accustomed to self-sufficiency. Sometimes meat was added to the main diet if game could be obtained near the camp. There were days when legionnaires exchanged some of their equipment for a little cheese or wine from the locals. But more often than not, dinner remained modest. A flatbread, grain soup, and a little olive oil. That was the whole feast. And yet, for a soldier who had walked dozens of kilometers, this food seemed like a delicacy. A hot meal at the end of a hard day was not just a source of calories. It had enormous psychological significance. The process of cooking, sharing dinner around the campfire, All this brought the contubernium together. Soldiers could discuss the past day, share news, or simply sit silently by the fire, regaining their strength. It was a rare moment of secluded peace, where everyone could afford a little quiet and warmth. The fire reflected in their faces, in the metal clasps of their tunics and helmets, creating a sense of unity. Even silence had weight here. No one said anything unnecessary, but in this silence, a sense of community could be felt. Everyone knew that tomorrow there would be another march, another day of heavy armor and the clang of weapons. But now they could just be human. When dinner was eaten and it began to get dark, it was time to sleep. And here the legionnaire's main ally was his cloak, the sagum. It was a simple rectangular piece of thick wool, but its value to the soldier was enormous. The wool from which it was made often contained natural lanolin, which made the cloak almost waterproof. Even in rain and snow, it retained body heat. The sagum was a versatile item. During the day, it protected against rain and wind while marching. At night, it turned into a blanket. Legionnaires did not sleep undressed. They lay down in their tunics and wrapped themselves tightly in their sagums. The wool retained body heat perfectly, creating a dry and warm microclimate. If the weather was particularly harsh, soldiers could pull up the hood and sleep with their faces covered from the wind. What if I showed you a time machine that proved that the Romans hardly slept? Of course, that's not true, but their sleep was organized completely differently from ours. A legionnaire couldn't just lie down and sleep until morning. The security of the camp required constant vigilance. Therefore, the night in a Roman camp was divided into 4 vigils, or guards, each lasting 3 hours. The night watch system was the cornerstone of Roman military discipline. Even the most fortified camp was vulnerable to surprise attacks. Therefore, sentries were posted around the entire perimeter of the rampart, at the gates, and at key points inside the camp. These soldiers had to stay awake and watch closely for any signs of danger. For each legionnaire, this meant that his sleep would be interrupted. The rotation system was organized at the level of centuries and contubernia. Each soldier knew in advance which of the 4 guards he would be on duty for. It could be the first guard immediately after sunset, or the most difficult one before dawn. The changing of the guard was a strict ritual. A special officer, the tesserarius, went around the posts and handed out the tessera, a wooden tablet with the password for the day. The changing of the guard was accompanied by the sounds of trumpets, which echoed throughout the camp. These sounds were an integral part of nightlife in the castrum. For a soldier sleeping in his tent, this meant that his sleep would be shallow. He had to be ready to wake up at the sound of the trumpet, quickly get dressed, and take up his post. Or conversely, he could be awakened by his comrades returning from duty and trying not to make noise in the cramped tent. Sleeping in such conditions was a real art. A legionnaire had to be able to fall asleep instantly as soon as he had the opportunity and wake up just as quickly at the signal. There was no time to get in the mood for sleep. Fatigue took its toll, and the soldiers probably fell asleep as soon as their heads touched their backpacks. The burden of guard duty was enormous. The sentry had to stand at full attention, in full armor, with a shield and pilum. He could not sit or lean. He had to listen to the silence of the night and peer into the darkness. If a sentry was caught sleeping on duty, the punishment was severe. This system ensured that the camp never slept completely. While one part of the legion rested, the other remained awake. This created a sense of constant readiness. The soldiers in the tents could sleep more peacefully, knowing that their comrades were standing on the ramparts and guarding their sleep. The night in the camp was filled with sounds. The quiet footsteps of patrols, changing of the guard, periodic bugle calls, the neighing of horses in the cavalry camp. It was not the peaceful silence we are accustomed to. It was the tense, lively silence of a military camp, ready to repel an attack at any moment. Such intermittent sleep was undoubtedly a serious test for the body. But for a Roman soldier, it was as much a part of his job as marching or fighting. He was trained for it from his first day of service. How effective do you think such a fragmented sleep pattern was? Soldiers could prepare their own food and warm themselves by the fire, but there was one factor that made their sleep completely different from ours. Are you ready to find out why Roman legionaries never slept through the night? In the next chapter, we will talk about how sleep and duty divided the dark hours of the day between them. Night in camp was not only a time for rest, but also for increased responsibility for one's equipment. In the darkness and cramped conditions of the tent, each legionnaire had to know exactly where every piece of his equipment was located. This determined not only the safety of expensive equipment, but also the speed of reaction in case of an alarm. Loss or damage to weapons was a serious offense. The main organizational center of a soldier's personal space was his backpack, or sarsina. It was not just a bag, but a complex structure made of poles to which personal belongings, provisions, tools, and part of the camp equipment were attached. At night, the sarsina took on a new function. It became both a safe and a pillow. Soldiers often slept with their heads resting on their backpacks. It wasn't very comfortable, but it served two purposes. First, it raised their heads above the cold ground. Second, and more importantly, soldiers always kept their most valuable personal belongings with them under their heads. This reduced the risk of theft in the crowded camp. Weapons required special attention. The gladius, a short sword, always remained in its sheath on the belt, and the belt probably lay next to the soldier, within immediate reach. Some could even sleep without removing their sword belt. In the event of a sudden night attack, the soldier had to be able to grab his sword in a second. Helmets and armor, especially the segmented cuirass lorica segmentata, were removed at night. Sleeping in armor was impossible and harmful to the equipment itself. It was carefully folded next to the sleeping place, often on a shield to protect it from moisture from the ground. Every soldier had to be able to get dressed in the dark in a matter of minutes. The large shield, the scutum, also served several purposes. During the day, it was a means of protection, and at night, it became part of the household. It could be used as a mat under the equipment to insulate it from the damp ground. Sometimes it was placed at the entrance to the tent to create an additional barrier against the wind. The spear, or pilum, was too long to store inside the tent. The pilums were most likely stacked in racks outside, next to the contubernium tent. They were guarded by sentries and ready for immediate use. Each soldier knew exactly where his pilum was located. Footwear, or caligy, was another important element. After a full day of marching, soldiers probably gave their feet a rest. However, the caligy always remained nearby so that they could be quickly put on in case of an alarm. Leaving shoes outside where they could get wet or stolen was unthinkable. This meticulous organization of equipment was part of the overall discipline. It transformed the cramped space of the tent into an orderly system. In the darkness where 8 people slept, chaos was unacceptable. Everyone knew their place and the place of each of their belongings. This habit of order, brought to the point of automatism, was the key to survival. It allowed the legion to transform from a sleeping camp into a battle formation in record time. Sleep was important, but readiness for battle was more important. The space inside the papilio was not just small, it was shared. 8 adult men had to not only sleep, but also exist side by side in a few square meters. This turned sleep from a personal matter into a collective activity that required strict adherence to rules and certain social ethics. The legionnaires in the tent most likely slept close to each other. In cold weather, this was not a disadvantage, but an advantage. Bodies lying close together generated and retained more heat. The soldiers covered themselves with their cloaks, but the combined heat of 8 people created a microclimate inside the tent that was significantly warmer than outside. The arrangement inside the tent probably had its own hierarchy. In the contubernium, there could be a senior soldier, a dean, who was responsible for order. Perhaps he got the best, driest, and warmest place. The recruits, on the other hand, could end up at the entrance, where it was colder and windy. Such cramped conditions required tolerance from the soldiers. Some might snore, some might toss and turn in their sleep. Some might get up for night duty, trying not to wake the others. All this was part of everyday life. Soldiers who spent years together learned to ignore such trifles. Sleeping together also strengthened the bonds of camaraderie. These 8 men were each other's closest family. They shared not only the hardships of the march, but also this small leather shelter. They trusted each other with their lives, not only in battle, but also in sleep, knowing that the comrade standing guard was protecting his sleep as well. The entrance to the tent was usually closed with a leather flap, but it did not provide a complete seal. Inside, there was probably always a feeling of air movement. On summer nights, this was a blessing. But in winter, it was a problem that was solved by wrapping themselves more tightly in their cloaks and huddling together. There was no such thing as personal space. The concept of privacy was foreign to camp life. Everything was visible, everything was shared. This created a special psychological atmosphere where personal conflicts had to be resolved immediately. Otherwise, coexistence became impossible. Noise was also a constant companion. The camp never felt completely silent. The sounds of trumpets, changing of the guard, footsteps of patrols, quiet conversations of those on duty, all this penetrated the leather walls of the tent. Soldiers got used to sleeping to this accompaniment, and complete silence would probably have seemed disturbing to them. Life in the Papilio was a harsh school of socialization. It taught soldiers mutual assistance, tolerance, and responsibility. Every legionnaire understood that his comfort depended directly on the comfort of his comrades. If he did not help gather firewood, everyone would be left without dinner. If he made noise, he would wake up those who had a hard march ahead of them tomorrow. This collective aspect of sleep was another element that made the Roman army so strong. It was strong not only because of its weapons, but also because of the bonds that formed between soldiers in those cramped leather tents. They were brothers in arms in the truest sense of the word. Although the classic image of a Roman legionnaire is a warrior sleeping in a leather tent in the middle of a camp, the reality of service was much more varied. The lion's share of the Roman army spent years, even decades, not on campaigns, but in stationary camps, castra, located along the borders of the empire. These permanent fortifications stretched along the Rhine, the Danube, in Britain, and even in Syria. In them, the Romans created a model of military life that combined discipline, order, and engineering excellence. Life in such camps was much more organized than in field conditions. Instead of tents, legionnaires lived in barracks, long, narrow buildings made of wood, brick, or stone. Each barracks was designed for an entire centuria, or 80 men, and was divided into 10 sections, one for each unit or contubernum. This structure reflected the iron logic of the Roman army. Each unit lived, ate, and slept together as a single entity. Each section consisted of 2 rooms. The first, smaller room was located at the entrance and served as a storage room. Helmets, armor, shields, weapons, and soldiers' personal belongings were kept here. The second, larger room was a bedroom where 8 legionnaires spent their nights. The room was small but well designed. Narrow passageways, smooth walls, minimal wasted space. Everything was functional and orderly. The bedrooms had wooden bunks, often 2-tiered, which allowed all the soldiers to be accommodated in safe space. This was a significant improvement over camp life, where they had to sleep directly on the ground, covered with a cloak. The bunks had mattresses stuffed with straw or wool, sometimes covered with coarse fabric. The soldiers covered themselves with their sagums, thick woolen cloaks that served them both on the march and at rest. The conditions were comfortable in their own way, but not luxurious. The barracks were a place for sleep and rest, but not for idleness. The air was saturated with the smell of leather, oil, and iron. At night, you could hear quiet snoring, the footsteps of the guard outside the door, and the crackling of the stove. A reminder that army life never completely falls asleep. Heating in the barracks was designed in a Romanly rational way. Sometimes a hypocaust system was used, heating the floor with hot air from stoves. But more often, simple hearths or clay stoves were installed in the soldiers' quarters. They were heated with wood, and the heat was distributed throughout the corridor. This saved the legionnaires even on the cold northern borders, in Britain or Germany. For a Roman who grew up under the Italian sun, this warmth was not just a comfort, but a necessity for survival. Evenings in the barracks followed a strict routine. After daytime training and guard duty, the soldiers returned to their quarters, cleaned their armor and swords, lubricated the metal with olive oil, and repaired their belts. Their togas, neatly folded, might hang in the corner, a symbol of citizenship, although they were rarely worn in the camps. Then they had dinner, bread, barley porridge, dried meat, wine, water. After the meal, there was a short rest, and some of the soldiers took up their night guard duty. The main advantage of stationary life was hygiene. Every large castrum had thermal baths, military baths. After a hard day's work, a legionnaire could wash, change his linen or wool tunic, and shave. This sharply distinguished garrison life from campaign life, where it was impossible to even wash for weeks. For the Romans, cleanliness was part of discipline, not a luxury. A centurion, who lived in a separate room at the end of the building, kept order in the barracks. His place was slightly higher than the floor level, a symbol of authority. He had his own bed, table, chair, and chest. The centurion could enter any room and check whether the floor was covered, whether the weapons were in place, and whether the armor was clean. There were no exceptions. Discipline remained ironclad. Despite the overall strictness, life in such camps was predictable and stable. Soldiers did not have to rebuild the camp every evening, get wet in the rain, or freeze in the open air. They had their own sleeping place, their own hearth, their own place at the table. This gave a sense of permanence so rare in military life. The existence of permanent camps demonstrated the power and foresight of the Roman Empire. Where other armies erected temporary fortifications, the Romans built stone fortresses designed to last for decades. Soldiers lived in them, got married, raised children, and nearby arose vicus, civilian settlements with taverns, workshops, and temples. These two types of sleep, campaign and garrison, were symbols of the two sides of the Roman military machine. One was sleep under the stars, among weapons and shields, ready for alarm at any moment. The other was the sleep of the garrison, behind stone walls, among neat rows of barracks and the smell of wood smoke. Together, they embodied the essence of Rome: flexibility, order, and the ability to adapt to any conditions while maintaining the main virtue: readiness for battle even in sleep. A legionnaire's sleep, however fitful and short, did not end at his own will. Like all life in the camp, awakening was collective and obeyed a strict signal. Long before dawn, in complete darkness, the silence of the night camp was broken by the piercing sound of a trumpet. It was the Diana signal, named after the goddess of hunting, whose time was early morning. This signal was the command to rise for the entire legion. There was no time to slowly come to one's senses. As soon as they heard the bugle, the soldiers had to get up immediately. Movement began in the cramped tent. 8 people simultaneously tried to get dressed, gather their belongings, and prepare for a new day. The first task was to quickly roll up their beds. The straw or leaf bedding was raked out of the tent. Personal belongings and equipment, which served as pillows and protection from the cold, had to be packed into a sarcina. Each soldier did this in the dark, by touch. But thanks to the iron routine, everything happened quickly and without fuss. Then it was the tent's turn. The leather sheet was removed from the central pole, neatly folded and divided into pieces. Each of the 8 soldiers of the contubernium took their piece of the tent, as well as pegs or part of the pole. In a few minutes, only a flattened rectangle of earth remained where their home had stood. At the same time, the soldiers tidied up their uniforms and equipment. They had to put on their armor, check the fastenings, and make sure their weapons were in place. Caligae, marching sandals, were laced tightly. Everything had to be ready for a march of many kilometers. All this had to be done in a minimum amount of time. While the soldiers were getting ready, the camp was already coming to life. The fires that had burned during the night for warmth were being extinguished. The units lined up on their streets waiting for orders. Centurions and optiones checked the readiness of their men, making sure that no one was left behind. Breakfast, if you could call it that, was just as quick. Most often, it consisted of leftovers from yesterday's dinner or a dry flatbread eaten on the go. There was no time for a full meal. The main task was to break camp as quickly as possible and set out on the march, taking advantage of the cool morning hours. The Diana signal was not just a wake-up call. It was a symbol of the Roman army's eternal movement. It signaled the end of a short respite and the beginning of a new trial. For a soldier, it was a transition from one state, relative rest, to another, requiring maximum endurance and concentration. When the legion left its night quarters, almost nothing remained behind. The ditch and rampart were the only evidence that a huge army had spent the night there. The tents were folded, the fires extinguished, and thousands of soldiers were already marching steadily along the road, beginning a new day. Their short, restless sleep was behind them. We see that the sleep of a Roman legionnaire was not just rest, but a complex and vital part of the military machine. It was not a passive process, but active work full of rituals and discipline. From the daily construction of the fortress to sleeping together in a cramped leather tent, everything was subordinated to one goal: maximum efficiency and survivability of the Legion. What do you think about this aspect of a Legionnaire's life? Which details of their military life did you find most surprising? Suggest topics for future videos about ancient Rome that you would like to see in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new research into the past.